Ciao, and welcome to Immersion Travel Italy. I'm Caterina Ferrara, travel author, blogger, and your host. This podcast is about experiencing Italy beyond the checklist, slowing down, paying attention, and understanding places not for just what you see, but for why they matter. This is part 2 of episode 14 in our Regional Capitals of Italy series, where we're traveling north to south, region by region, uncovering the cities that shape Italy's identity far beyond the headlines. We visited the regional capitals in the north, towns you may or may not heard of like Aosta, Trento, Trieste, and of course big cities of Milan, Venice, and Genoa. We also visited the powerhouse capitals of central Italy, including Florence, Rome, and Bologna. In today's episode, we've traveled south to Naples and the region of Campania. This is part 2 of a 2-part journey. Naples is not a city that fits neatly into a single episode, so I was forced to divide it into 2. Mount Vesuvius looms constantly in the background. The Amalfi Coast cities curve around the bay. Ancient cities like Pompeii and Caserta sit within easy reach, alongside family-friendly sand beaches farther north in Formia. In our first episode on Naples, we laid the foundation. We traced the city from its ancient Greek roots as Neapolis, through Roman power, volcanic destruction, medieval kingdoms, Norman and Angevin rule, Spanish dominance, Bourbon splendor, revolution, unification, war, and rebirth. We explored Naples as a city of contradictions, sacred and chaotic, magnificent and gritty, layered, emotional, and fiercely alive. We ended episode 1 not on land, but on the water. In episode 2, we move beyond the city itself into the wider world of Campania, a region shaped by emperors, eruptions, kings, craftsmen, and everyday life that continues alongside ruins older than memory. We'll step into the ancient world at Pompeii and Herculaneum, where Roman life was frozen in time. We'll talk about the royal palace of Caserta, a palace built to rival Versailles and proclaim Bourbon power through scale, symmetry, water, and design. We'll also explore the human side of Naples, its local artisans, family-run workshops, and traditions passed quietly from generation to generation. Throughout the episode, I'll share immersive experiences and how you can experience Naples at its best. So let's continue our journey. In our last episode, we finished up talking about the islands of Procida, Ischia, and Capri. Today, on our second day on our boat trip, we're going to set out again from Naples, following the coast south toward the Amalfi Coast, the Costiera Amalfitana. Approaching the Amalfi Coast by boat is fantastic. Towns rise vertically from the sea. Houses cling to the cliffs. Roads disappear from view. You can understand immediately why the coastline was shaped by maritime access long before roads existed. On our boat ride, we stopped in Amalfi to visit the Duomo of Amalfi, formerly the Cathedral of Sant'Andrea. It anchors the town in stone. The cathedral's striped, Byzantine-influenced facade rises above the piazza, while the long, monumental staircase forces you to slow down and look up. Amalfi was once a powerful maritime republic, and the cathedral was designed to project wealth, confidence, and global reach to anyone arriving from the sea. Bronze doors cast in Constantinople, mosaics shimmering above the entrance, and a bell tower layered with Arab Norman details all speak to centuries of trade with the Eastern Mediterranean. Inside, the atmosphere shifts from busy piazza to hushed grandeur. Beneath the altar rests the relics of Saint Andrew the Apostle, brought here in the Middle Ages, reinforcing Amalfi's spiritual importance alongside its commercial power. Adjacent is the Chiostro del Paradiso, the cloister of paradise, with its graceful arches and palm-lined courtyard. It adds a quieter, almost contemplative counterpoint to the cathedral's public facade. After visiting the Duomo, the town invites you to wander. Narrow streets radiate outward from the piazza, lined with small shops selling ceramics, paper goods, linen, limoncello, and coastal specialties. It feels somewhat like Sorrento, but more compact and more concentrated, meant for a stroll rather than settling in for hours. Just below the cathedral steps, we refilled our water bottles at the fountain in the piazza, where water flows from sculpted figures carved centuries ago. It is one of those small, unforgettable Amalfi moments, ancient, practical, and symbolic. We had a gelato, we walked through the shops, we paused to people watch, and we let the energy of the piazza wash over us. Boats arriving, tour groups dispersing, locals weaving through it all with practiced ease. In the summer, Amalfi feels busy, energetic, and layered. The piazza hums with conversation and footsteps. Church bells echo overhead, and the sea is never far from sight. It's vibrant rather than overwhelming, especially if you treat it as a pause, not a base. Arriving in Amalfi by boat makes all of this rather romanticized. From the water, you understand why the cathedral dominates the town, why the town grew from the harbor. Amalfi is not a scenic village that becomes famous later. It was a port city built on ambition, navigation, and influence, and the cathedral remains its most eloquent reminder. I'll mention the Feast of Sant'Andrea Apostolo, which takes place on June 27th and November 30th. St. Andrew is Amalfi's patron saint, and his festival is the town's most important event. The celebrations center on a dramatic procession of the saint's relics through the streets and down the monumental staircase of the cathedral, accompanied by fireworks and crowds packed into the piazza. The June celebration is especially lively, tied to summer energy and maritime tradition. It's a powerful moment when Amalfi's faith, history, and sea identity converge. The entire day on the Amalfi Coast unfolded slowly. We did some swimming, some cruising, looking back at the coastline, unwilling to turn away. It was one of those days you wanted to stretch, slow, and hold on to. Without question, one of the best travel experiences of our lives. And when it ended, I wished I had booked a third day. Next, we're going to move into some experiences in Naples. And the first one is the most authentic craft experience, and that is visiting San Giorgio Armeno and watching the artists at work and stepping into the worlds they create. World after world, scene after scene, the nativity scenes. Inside this workshop on the narrow street, the artisans are building entire universes in miniature with movement. Birds fly, ladies roll out dough, men load pizza into fiery ovens, chickens eat their seed. A true Neapolitan presepe is vast. It's architectural. Mountains rise from cork and stone. Staircases wind through villages. Taverns glow with tiny lanterns. Markets overflow with fruit, fish, bread, and wine. In the nativities, we saw bakers caught in mid-motion, shepherds resting on the hillsides, women carrying water jars, musicians frozen in song, tavern keepers pouring wine, merchants bargaining, and children playing. And above it all, angels hover. It's an extraordinary experience to watch these artisans at work. They're sculpting faces by hand. They're painting expressions no larger than a fingernail. They're cutting fabric for tiny garments and carefully placing the figures into scenes that feel alive despite their scale. Many of the workshops have been creating the presepe for generations. Techniques are passed quietly from family member to family member. Standing inside the workshops, you realize something important. The presepe is not about Christmas. It's about how Naples sees life. Sacred and ordinary layered together, faith standing shoulder to shoulder with the citizens, and beauty emerging from the chaos. This experience is truly mesmerizing. Another Neapolitan art I want to mention is the leather workshops. Naples has a long tradition of leather craftsmanship, especially gloves, belts, wallets, and small leather goods. While Florence dominates the luxury narrative, Naples historically has focused on practical, wearable craftsmanship, often family-run and passed down quietly. Small workshops still exist near the historic center, producing hand-cut leather goods. Unlike Florence's luxury houses and formal demonstrations, Naples' leather grew out of daily necessity. These were objects meant to be worn, used, replaced, and made by hand in family workshops. I'll mention some notable leather shops and artisans in or near the historic center. The first one is Guanti Nappa Gloves, one of the most respected and historic glove makers in Naples. They specialize in handmade leather gloves, and they have a long family tradition. The shop feels timeless, and you can often see the tools and materials as they work behind the counter. The artisans are happy to speak with you. You can ask questions and understanding how glove making fits into Naples' past. The second leather shop is Nappa Milano, Napoli, a modern continuation of the glove traditions, with high-quality leather gloves and a blend of traditional techniques and contemporary design. There are also small leather workshops near Via dei Tribunali and Spanacapoli. These places don't have websites. They're just part of the experience. One related craft I want to mention is Mario Tallarico. Not leather, but handmade umbrellas. Often visited precisely because you can see the artisan at work. And it shows Naples values functional craftsmanship. And one of the most meaningful ways to experience Naples is through a guided food tour or a Neapolitan cooking class. A good food tour moves you through neighborhoods rather than restaurants, stopping where the locals eat. You taste as you walk, you stand at the counter, You talk with the vendors and you learn about certain dishes and why they exist at all. A cooking class is a second option. You can cook with a local, and as I've recommended in previous episodes, I use Cesarine to find locals for cooking classes. A true Neapolitan food experience includes sitting down for dinner, probably built around ragu napolitano or genovese. You'll probably have an espresso or a crema di cafe and a dessert. Whether you join a food tour or take a cooking class, you're stepping briefly into the Neapolitan life. You're learning how the city eats and why it eats the way it does. Here, food carries memory, hardship, joy, and pride all at once. Since Amalfi is close by, I also want to mention that Amalfi is known for its paper. Amalfi paper is still made today by hand in the same valley where it has been produced since the Middle Ages. In the hills just above the town of Amalfi, fast-moving streams once powered dozens of paper mills. By the 13th century, Amalfi had become one of Europe's most important centers for handmade paper, exporting it all across the Mediterranean. Long before paper became common elsewhere, Amalfi was supplying royal courts, merchants, and the Vatican. What makes this an experience is that you can see and touch the process. The Museo della Carta Amalfi offers an accessible and immersive experience around Amalfi paper. Housed inside a former 13th century paper mill, the museum allows visitors to move through the original rooms, see antique machinery, and watch live demonstrations of how paper was made by hand, using cotton fibers, water, and wooden molds. You'll see the vats where the pulp was prepared, the screens used to form each sheet, and the pressing and drying process. This allows you to have freshly made paper when you leave, and it explains why it's so prized. Thick, texture durable, and designed to last centuries. The visit usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour, and it fits beautifully into a day in Amalfi. There's also the Amatruda paper mill. Founded in 1380, Amatruda is considered the oldest continuously operating paper mill in Europe. Their paper is still produced using traditional methods, and it's used today for diplomatic documents, calligraphy, art and restoration, and luxury stationery. While Amatruda functions primarily as a working manufacturer, their retail space in Amalfi allows visitors to see, touch, and purchase Amalfi paper products. Some guided or prearranged visits allow deeper insight into production. Paper tradition connects directly to Naples' history. As a maritime power, Naples relied on written contracts, ship records, trade agreements, and legal and religious documents. Amalfi paper was strong, flexible, and reliable in humid conditions, making it ideal for seafaring cultures. The paper you hold here once carried decisions that shaped kingdoms, trade routes, and diplomacy. Another craft experience is around ceramics. The ceramics in Vietri sul Mare. Vietri sul Mare is at the eastern gateway of the Amalfi Coast, and they have been producing hand-painted ceramics since at least the 15th century. The town's position mattered. Clay arrived by sea, kilns fired close to the port, finished tiles and tableware were shipped across Campania and beyond. What makes Vietri ceramics immediately recognizable is their relationship to the place. The colors are brighter than elsewhere in Italy. Yellows like sunlight and lemons, blues pulled straight from the sea, greens, oranges, and florals that feel almost exuberant. This is Campania in ceramic form. Vietri sul Mare is about 55 kilometers or 34 miles from the historic center of Naples, and by train, it's an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. You can also get there by ferry. Seasonally, you would take the ferry boat from Naples to Salerno and then spend a few minutes in a taxi or local bus. Also in town, if you like ceramics, is the Ceramic Museum, the Museo della Ceramica. The evolution of Vietri ceramics is shown here, as well as the influence of the Amalfi Coast landscape. The visit adds depth, helping you recognize motifs and techniques when you return to the workshops. Plan about 45 minutes for the museum. I will also mention that you can combine Amalfi and Vietri sul Mare into a full day if you wish. Mention that boats and ferries can get you to the Amalfi Coast, but one of the most memorable experiences we had was driving along the Amalfi Coast. Okay, during the boat tour, I talked about enjoying the coast by boat, but there is another way by car. We hired a driver. We would not have tried to do this curvy road on our own. The driver picked us up in Naples, and from the moment we left the city, the day unfolded slowly and spectacularly. As you travel south from Naples, the landscape changes. The road tightens and the drama intensifies. Positano, the icon. When you pass through Positano, even on the road above, it feels familiar. This is the image most people carry in their minds when they think of the Amalfi Coast. Houses cascade down the cliff and soft, sun-faded colors stacked vertically like a village poured down the mountainside. Balconies overlap, staircases crisscross, bougainvillea spills over the walls. Everything seems to be leaning toward the sea. What makes Positano special is not a single site, but the sense of vertical movement. Walking in town means climbing and descending constantly, passing boutiques, linen shops, sandal makers, cafes, and small galleries tucked into the hillside. From almost anywhere, the sea is present, blue, wide, and impossibly close. Positano is glamorous, yes, but also theatrical. It invites you to look, to photograph, to linger briefly before moving on. Even without stopping, seeing Positano from the road explains why it has captured the imagination for decades. I'll mention Positano's Festival of Santa Maria Assunta, held on August 15th. Positano's festival honors the Assumption of Mary, whose Byzantine icon is housed in the church of Santa Maria Assunta. The celebration culminates in a spectacular fireworks display over the sea, illuminating the cliffside village. Music, processions, and summer crowds fill the town late into the night, and I mean late. It is one of the most visually striking festival moments on all of the Amalfi Coast. Just beyond Positano, the rhythm changes. Praiano feels quieter, more residential, less performative. The buildings are spaced out, the views open wide. Instead of looking straight down on the sea, you look across it, watching light move along the coast. The town is known for its sunsets. In the late afternoon, the cliffs glow warm and the sea softens into deeper shades of blue. Praiano is a place where you can slow down without realizing it. From the road, it offers some of the most expansive viewpoints on the coast, ideal for stopping, looking, and breathing it in before making the next dramatic turn. Praiano's festival is the Feast of San Gennaro on September 19th. Praiano shares Naples' patron saint with a more intimate and community-focused festival. Religious processions, local gatherings, and evening festivities mark the occasion. Fireworks and music bring life to the town without overwhelming it. The next spot I want to mention is Furore. It's not a town at all. It's famous for what it lacks. There's no traditional center or no main piazza. Instead, houses are scattered across cliffs with painted murals that turn the walls into works of art. It has a gorge. The road you're driving on is going to cross high above the Fiordo di Furore. A deep, narrow cut in the rock opens suddenly toward the sea. Looking down, you see sheer cliffs plunging into silver water below, crossed by a dramatic bridge overhead. Descending into the ford, you leave behind the village and arrive at one of the coast's most extraordinary natural sights. We stopped here to swim, climbing down toward the water and jumping in from the pier. Some people climbed higher along the rocks before jumping, but the jump itself was pure exhilaration. And you're not far from the rocky beach. From there, the road carries you through Amalfi, which we talked about previously, and the road climbs steadily toward Ravello, and the sea begins to feel distant. Not because it disappears, because you're looking down on it. From Ravello's terraces, especially those at the historic villas, the Amalfi Coast stretches out in a long, interrupted line. Cliffs fold into one another, towns appear small and delicate below. Boats become white flecks, moving slowly across the deep blue water. On a clear day, you can see Capri floating far in the Bay of Naples, faint but unmistakable on the horizon. From places like Villa Cimbrone and Villa Ruffolo, the views are expansive. Gardens open directly onto the sky and sea with no barrier between you and the horizon. Ravello has long drawn artists, writers, and musicians, not for beaches or swimming, but for clarity. The town invites reflection. Ravello's festival takes place during the summer months, between June and September. It's one of Italy's most prestigious music and arts festivals, with roots dating back into the 1950s. Concerts take place on terraces overlooking the sea, particularly Villa Ruffolo, creating an almost unreal setting where music and landscape merge. Classical music, orchestras, and international performers dominate the program. This festival reflects Ravello's long identity as a place of art and inspiration. When we traveled along the coast in July, we stopped often. The coast is beautiful. We ended our day in Sorrento, and it could not have been a better place to land for dinner. After a full day of cliffs, swimming in villages, and constant motion, Sorrento was a beautiful stop. The town sits high above the sea, with wide promenades, open views, and an ease that contrasts beautifully with the intensity of the Amalfi Coast Road. Strolling along Corso Italia and smaller side streets, you pass shops selling inlaid woodwork, ceramics, linen, and local food products. It's a good place to browse and simply enjoy being back on level ground after the dramatic coastal drive. Sorrento is surrounded by lemon groves. This is the spiritual home of limoncello. Stopping for a limoncello tasting is more than a souvenir experience. And by the way, you can barely avoid it because every restaurant is going to offer it to you. You learn how the thick lemon peels are infused in alcohol, how sugar and thyme balance the sharpness, and why this digestivo is traditionally served ice cold after dinner to help you digest. Many small producers and shops offer tastings. Some family-run operations explain the process in detail. It's a fitting way to end a long day, refreshing, bright, and unmistakably local. We chose to have dinner overlooking the water, watching the light fade into the bay. It was a calm way to end the day. Sorrento's patron saint is Sant'Antonio Abate, Saint Anthony Abbot, and his feast day is celebrated in January. It's one of the most heartfelt events of the year. The celebration includes religious services, processions, and community gatherings that are deeply local. Even outside peak season, the town comes alive with devotion and tradition. The festival reveals Sorrento beyond the postcard image, grounded in faith and civic pride. Our next experience is going to be a visit to Pompeii. Visiting Pompeii is one of the most powerful experiences in Italy because it's not a city imagined, it's a city paused in time, and at the same time, a city still being uncovered. You're stepping back to the year AD 79 when Pompeii was a thriving Roman town of roughly 11,000 people. It had shops, bars, villas, bath complexes, temples, theaters, and a fully functioning infrastructure. Life here was busy, social, and intensely urban. And then in a matter of hours, everything stopped. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, ash and pumice buried Pompeii so quickly that entire streets, rooms, and even people were sealed exactly where they fell. The catastrophe is the reason we can still walk the city today. Pompeii has been an active archaeological site since 1748, when systematic excavations began under the Bourbon kings of Naples. That makes it one of the oldest continuously excavated archaeological sites in the world, and it's not finished. As you walk through the ruins, it's not uncommon to see students, professors, and researchers actively at work, excavating, documenting, and preserving what remains. In recent years, archaeologists have uncovered new villas, frescoes, mosaics, inscriptions, and everyday objects, continuing to reshape what we know. When we visited Pompeii, our son was 10 years old, and we were deeply grateful that we had hired an expert guide. Standing at the entrance, the site felt enormous. It's a town. Streets stretched in every direction, walls, columns, fragments everywhere. Without guidance, it would have been easy to wander past something extraordinary without realizing what you're looking at. Our guide changed that for us. She pointed out worn ruts carved in the road by Roman carts. She explained how traffic once flowed through the streets as well as waste. She stopped us at houses we might have passed by, opening doors to villas where frescoes still clung to the walls and mosaics marked the thresholds. She helped us understand the villas and how Romans lived vertically, how light entered the courtyards, how water was collected and redirected, and how public life constantly overlapped with private space. Slowly, the city came to life for us. At the forum, she helped us imagine the noise, the crowds, the speeches, the commerce. Near the amphitheater, she explained the gladiator culture, the fame of the fighters, and how entertainment shaped life. Suddenly, graffiti scratched onto the walls seemed more intimate rather than incidental. Pompeii is vast and layered, and a knowledgeable guide did help us. One note I'll give you from this experience. We visited Pompeii in July, and we went in the afternoon, and I do not recommend this. Pompeii is a city of stone and dust and open sky. There's very little shade. The streets reflect heat upward, and in the summer temperatures, it can feel far more intense than the forecast suggests. By midday and afternoon, the site absorbs and holds the heat of the sun. So, target the morning. Arriving early allows for softer light and more manageable temperatures. Next up, Herculaneum. In my episode Campania Uncovered, which went live on Apple Podcasts and Spotify on September 28th, 2025, I spoke with a local, Kasia Chojecki, creator of the Amongst Romans podcast. She lived in Campania, and she recommended Herculaneum over Pompeii. Not because Pompeii is not extraordinary, but because Herculaneum offers something different. Herculaneum is just about 12 kilometers or about 7.5 miles southeast of Naples' historic center. It's one of the easiest archaeological sites to reach from the city. You can reach it on the train line in about 20 minutes, and from the station, the entrance to the site is just a short walk downhill. Because of its proximity, Herculaneum fits beautifully into a Naples stay. As a town, Herculaneum was smaller and wealthier than Pompeii. While Pompeii was a busy commercial town, Herculaneum functioned more as an elite seaside residential city, home to Roman senators, merchants, and aristocrats who built elegant homes overlooking the sea. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79, Herculaneum was not buried in ash and pumice like Pompeii, but in superheated volcanic mud, which hardened almost instantly. And that difference changed everything. As a result, at Herculaneum, you're going to see wooden doors and beams, furniture, and staircases. The upper stories of the houses still exist. There are richly colored frescoes that feel freshly painted, and everyday objects are frozen exactly where they were used. The town is a bit smaller and the streets narrower. If I had to compare the two cities, I would mention that Herculaneum does not have a large amphitheater and it doesn't have the gladiator presence. It also doesn't have a vast public forum, a city area like Pompeii. But it offers an exceptional insight into Roman domestic life. You see houses that were constructed, balconies that still exist, and how furniture was arranged. I would not try and do both Pompeii and Herculaneum in a single visit to Naples. Each site asks for a different kind of attention. But I did want to mention Herculaneum because it can be experienced in 2 to 3 hours, while Pompeii needs a little bit more. Moving from experiences to day trips, I want to mention the Reggia di Caserta. One of the most rewarding day trips from Naples is about 40 minutes from the Naples station to the Caserta station, and the palace is literally across the street. The Reggia di Caserta was commissioned in 1752 by Charles of Bourbon, the King of Naples and Sicily, later the King of Spain. Naples was already one of Europe's richest and largest cities, but Charles wanted something more. He wanted a royal retreat that would rival Versailles and demonstrate the Bourbon power and legitimacy. He wanted it to be safely inland, free from the potential of naval attack, and he wanted it to serve both as a royal residence and an administrative capital. Caserta was chosen carefully. The architect was Luigi Vanvitelli. He's one of the greatest minds of the era. His task was staggering. He designed not only the palace, but the entire surrounding landscape, water systems, gardens, and an urban plan as a unified vision. As you approach, the palace feels almost unreal. The facade stretches for more than 800 feet, a vast, symmetrical wall of stone punctuated by endless windows. Passing through the central arch, you enter the inner courtyard, and suddenly the scale becomes more personal. The palace surrounds you on all sides. Stone light and shadow create a sense of controlled grandeur. Inside the palace, one of the most beautiful sights is the grand staircase. This is the broad marble steps rise in sweeping symmetry, framing columns and sculptures. This was designed not just for function, but for ceremony. Imagine silk dresses, uniforms, and processions ascending and descending these steps. The royal apartments unfold in a sequence of increasingly elaborate spaces. Gilded ceilings, painted frescoes, silk wall coverings, chandeliers. Each room reflects Bourbon state and political messaging. They're not private spaces, they're stages. Often compared to the Versailles Chapel is the Palatine Chapel. This space reinforces the connection between monarchy and divine authority. Light filters in softly, and the scale reminds you that faith and power are deeply intertwined. If the palace impresses you, the gardens astonish. Stretching for nearly 3 kilometers, the gardens form a long, straight axis that pulls you endlessly forward. It's one of the longest and most ambitious gardens in Europe. Fountains cascade off one another. Mythological scenes unfold in stone. Water flows entirely by gravity, fed by an aqueduct designed specifically for the palace. At the far end, the great waterfall rises dramatically, framed by hills beyond. Walking the gardens feels like moving through a painting that never ends. A town naturally grew up around the palace, and that's part of the experience. Modern Caserta is lively, local, and unpretentious. Streets near the palace are filled with cafes, shops, and bakeries catering to students, families, and visitors alike. Just above the city lies Caserta Vecchia, the medieval heart of the area. Stone streets, a cathedral, and a panoramic view offers contrast to the Bourbon grandeur below. One of Caserta's lesser-known but most fascinating stories is its connection to silk production, centered in a nearby hamlet of San Leuccio. San Leuccio was developed in the late 1700s by Ferdinand IV of Bourbon as an experimental royal silk colony, part of an ambitious Enlightenment-era vision. The goal was revolutionary for its time: to create a self-sustaining community where workers were educated, housed, employed by the crown, and producing luxury silk for Europe's most powerful courts. And yes, the silk production still exists here. And yes, you can visit. It's a UNESCO-listed site, officially part of the Reggia di Caserta complex. Visitors can tour the former silk workshops, see historic looms and machinery, see the quarters where the workers lived and the planned village layout, and see an exhibition explaining silk production from cocoon to fabric. Yes, silk is still produced here, not on the industrial scale of the Bourbon period, but silk is still woven today using traditional methods primarily for restoration of historic interiors, luxury upholstery, and high-end decorative fabrics. Silk from San Lucio has been used in the restoration of palaces, embassies, and historic buildings across Italy and Europe. And yes, there is a factory shop. You can purchase silk fabrics, scarves, home textiles, and decorative pieces inspired by historic patterns. This is a great place to see the history, understand the process, and take home something authentic. The second day trip I want to mention is to Paestum, Greek grandeur in an open countryside, about 95 kilometers south of Naples. Paestum is one of the most underrated day trips in Naples and one of the most powerful archaeological landscapes in Italy. Founded by Greek settlers in 600 BC, this was a thriving Magna Graecia city long before Rome dominated the peninsula. Later absorbed by the Romans, Paestum eventually declined and was largely forgotten, which is exactly why the remains are so well preserved. In Paestum, you'll see the Temple of Neptune. This is mid-5th century BC. It's the best preserved Doric temple in Italy and one of the finest in the ancient Greek world. Its massive columns and perfect proportions create a sense of balance and authority that feels timeless. Standing beside it, you understand Greek ideas of harmony, order, and power. There's also the Temple of Hera. It was a basilica built in 550 BC. Older and more experimental in design, the temple shows the evolution of Greek architecture in real time. The columns are thicker and closer together and slightly irregular, giving the structure a raw, almost muscular presence. There's also the Temple of Hera, too, more refined than the earlier temple. Together, the three temples form one of the most impressive sacred Greek landscapes in Europe. There's also the Paestum Archaeological Museum, as well as ancient city walls and a forum. Paestum's city walls stretch for nearly 5 kilometers and are remarkably intact. Walking them gives you a sense of the city's scale and importance in antiquity. Paestum is ideal for travelers who want depth with no crowds. Another city I want to mention is Benevento. It's about 70 kilometers northeast, an hour and 20 minutes on the train. Benevento is completely different from the rhythm of coastal Campania. Inland, quieter, it tells a story that stretches from Roman imperial power through the Lombards into medieval southern Italy. Originally a Samnite settlement, Benevento became an important Roman city along the Via Appia, one of the empire's most vital roads. After Rome fell, it emerged as a major Lombard duchy, making it one of the most significant centers of early medieval Italy. Here you'll see the Arch of Trajan from AD 114, one of the best preserved Roman triumphal arches in existence, built to honor Emperor Trajan. The reliefs celebrate civic life, military campaigns, and imperial generosity. The level of detail is extraordinary, unlike many Roman monuments. It stands fully intact within the modern city. You'll want to see the Church of Santa Sofia from the 8th century. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's one of the most important Lombard churches in Italy. Its unusual circular design and layered construction reflect a fusion of Roman, Byzantine, and Germanic influences. The church anchors Benevento's medieval identity. There's a partly excavated Roman theater, impressive in scale. It reinforces Benevento's importance as a cultural and civic center during Roman times. Benevento's old town is compact and walkable, filled with stone buildings, small piazzas, and distinctly local atmosphere. There's a regional museum called Museo del Sannio, which explains Benevento's long history from its Samnite origins through Roman and Lombard periods. It provides an excellent context for understanding why this inland city mattered so much. I also want to mention Gaeta. It's about 80 kilometers north and about an hour and 10 minutes on the train. Gaeta is one of these places that quietly surprises people. Strategically important since Roman times, it later became a stronghold for medieval and Bourbon rulers, and its layers are still visible today. What to see? The Montagna Spaccata and Santuario della Santissima Trinità. This dramatic split mountain overlooking the sea is Gaeta's most famous site. Legend says that the rock split at the moment of Christ's crucifixion. The sanctuary clings to the cliff's edge, and the views over the water are unforgettable. There's also a castle here, the Castello Antonino Aragonese. Towering above the town, the castle reflects this city's long military importance. Its layered construction tells stories of Angevin and Aragonese control, and it offers sweeping views of the coast. There's also a historic center, Gaeta Vecchia. The stone stairways, narrow lanes, and small piazzas define the old town. It feels authentic and lived in. I also wanted to bring you to this town because this is where there's a beach worth highlighting, the Spiaggia di Serpo. It's one of the top-rated beaches in central Italy, and it works beautifully as a day trip from Naples. It's got wide, sandy, and gently sloping beach with clear water, services, and a long promenade. Unlike the Amalfi Coast beaches, Serpo is comfortable, swimmable, and great for families. I wanted to show you Gaeta because it has a real sand beach, not just a cliffside cove. So as you can see from my list of things to do, Naples is not a city that you can simply visit once. It's a city that you need to come back to. Over the course of these episodes, we have crossed through layers of time, from Greek foundations to Roman cities frozen in ash, from Bourbon palaces built to rival Versailles, to coastal towns shaped by trade, faith, and daily life. We've seen how Naples lives with beauty and risk side by side, how history here is not behind a glass but underfoot, and how Campania unfolds outwardly in every direction, with depth and variety. What makes Naples extraordinary is not just its monuments, but its continuity. It adapted, it endured, and it reinvented itself again and again, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly, always intensely. Campania mirrors that same spirit, from the monumental temples of Paestum to the inland calm of Benevento, from the islands of Procida and Ischia to the grandeur of Caserta and the drama of the Amalfi Coast. This region reminds you that southern Italy is not one story, it's many layered together. Thank you for spending time with me as we visited the wonders of Napoli and the Amalfi Coast. Next time, we'll continue our Regional Capitals of Italy series, moving east to the region of Molise, a region that some Italians jokingly insist does not exist. More on that next Friday. Until then, travel slowly, travel deeply, and let the cities tell their stories.